Okay, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk about some of the work that I've been doing and hosting this interactive workshop about code review. Wait, I can't see anyone. All right, there you go. Um, and reproducible analysis and R. As I said, I'm the current president of SORTEE, but I'm also a research associate working at the University of Glasgow. Um, Let's see, can I actually? All right, there you go. So this is gonna be really a very interactive um workshop. I've created an OSF repository with some absolutely fantastic examples of um code data project structure. So that this is what will be used in this workshop. So either use the QR code on the right, or there's a link here. Um, to access it, it'll be under the Files tab, so don't be worried that the home screen now appears blank on OSF. But we're going to go through tips and advice for producing a reproducible project structure, data and code, and then lastly, via breakout rooms, we're going to try and discuss some code review, which is something that I've become quite keen on in the last few years. A lot of what we'll cover is on these fantastic papers here, and a disclaimer: I'm by no means an expert. A lot of um, what I've sort of learned has been from other people, particularly members of SORTEE, um, and there's been it's an active learning process. I'm still learning new tips and tricks to this day, but here's a couple of really good papers that I think people might like to read if you're interested. Obviously, this is recorded, so you should be able to see this if you're interested. But they contain a lot of useful guides and tips. There's also a really nice 3-day crash course here. Um, so if you scan this QR code, it goes through a whole load of um, reproducibility. Lots of different topics are covered there. Okay, so to start off with, can everyone see this? I hope it's launched. But if everyone could go to menti.com and input this code at the top of the screen, which is 52933816. It's quite long. Slightly annoying it's that long. But I just wanted to get people's opinions. When I say the word reproducibility, what do people think I mean? And there's no stupid answer. Feel free to put whatever you think. But let's get some answers popping up on the screen. So if you just go to menti.com and put that code in, you should be able to send some responses. Oh, someone's written in the chat. Amazing. Thanks. Yes. So that would be good. Let's see what people think reproducibility means. I'll give people say 5 minutes to come up with solutions to be able to replicate analyses. Yeah, that's a good one, right? And document code in such a way another person can understand what's been done. Yeah, great. Yeah, very important. Very, very important. Not just code though, also data. Showing your work. Yep, yep. Being transparent. That's all to do with fair principles. The ability for other researchers to reproduce experimental analysis from information provided by the original researcher. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Same data, same methods. I feel like this might be from Alfredo because that's two types computation reproducibility. That seems very uh yeah, that's it. Analytical and computational. Okay, able to replicate analysis. So it's interesting that people have said that because then my follow-up question is, uh, uh, as it loads, what is replicability? So the difference between reproducibility and replicability. What are the two differences? Um, Note that I use uh, that there is I use a distinction between them. So using the same code. Oh, is it the same code? Is it a different code? Is the same code. Make a copy. Interesting. Okay. So often people use these words interchangeably, and they can be subtly different. But it's something to think about. So let's see some responses coming up, and then I'll being able to repeat it. Yes, exactly. That's a good one. See, same code and same data set. That's actually reproducibility. There are slight distinctions. Um, okay, let's have a couple more responses and then yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, like I said, I'm not an expert, but the next sort of graphic that I'm going to show, I think, helps quite uh being able to repeat previous study. Yeah, well, yes, in some ways, yeah. Okay, so moving on. So the reason why I mention this is so the Turing way has a really nice description of this, and I feel, and as well as Malika Eel's talk that she gave is very nice. And I feel that these encompass two different things. Um, so reproducibility is taking the same data and same analysis, and then you can reproduce exactly the same results that someone's got. Replicability is where you take the same analysis, so maybe the same code, you collect your own data, and you can reach the same conclusions essentially. Um, so they may not be exactly the same because it's different data, but you can reach the same conclusions. And this all links to credibility. So you have reliability as well, which is all to do with pre-registering. It's to do with a priori hypotheses. You then have reproducibility, so that's same data, same questions, same methods, you get the same conclusions. And then replicability, which is independent studies reaching the same outcome. And they all link to credibility. And why am I mentioning this? Well, we're some people may have heard of the term the replication crisis, and this is the idea that a large proportion of scientific studies published across disciplines don't replicate. And there's lots of reasons for this, and one of the biggest reasons is due to lack of quality integrity of research and publication practices, and lack of transparency, which is the one of the really important things, as well as questionable research practices. I'm not going to go into that here, but uh, it's sort of all relevant to why reproducibility is so important. And this was quite a well-known paper in 2016, I believe. I can't actually see the date. Um, which was asking basically 1,500 scientists if they thought that there was a crisis. Obviously, it's a little bit out of date now, um, but using in this quite blurry graphic here, you can see that the number of people in different fields who've tried to replicate their own work, reproduce their own work, or replicate someone else's. Um, there's quite a lot of failure in the ability to reproduce an experiment. And this is just another one, successful replication rates. So being able to replicate previous results, very low across different fields. So it's not just limited to biology, but well, cancer biology, obviously, pharmacology, psychology, economics. And there's lots of possible reasons for this, and one of them being questionable research practices or QRPs. And if you're interested, there's a lot of really fantastic pieces of work who've where they've looked into this by particularly Hannah Fraser um, has looked into this. But this is just oh yeah, then this is the 2017 paper here where they go into the prevalence of different QRPs that could potentially be reducing reproducibility and replicability. And the answer to this, it's not going to solve everything, but one of the chief and important answers is open science. It's being transparent, open, and reliable about your research. So, for instance, I quite like this graphic here. So you have some researchers that are trying to make a robot. They're being transparent about their methodologies. Their methodologies are free. It's accessible, so anyone can actually use it and develop their own robots. And then it's made in such a way that um, people are able to make them to, I don't know, do a jump rope thing. Um, and in that way, that's the essence of open science. And I quite like this definition from the Center of Open Science here. It's the global movement that aims to make scientific research freely accessible to everyone. It strengthens trust in research findings. and so fostering practices like data sharing and code sharing. Um, so one of the next kind of question I want to ask is, so obviously it's very important share data and code, but why don't we? What are some barriers that people think um, stop maybe yourselves or others from sharing data and code? What are some significant barriers that you think need to be overcome? So using the same code as before. Old myths. I kind of want someone to explain what that means. But time to make code presentable. It can be it is a bit of a time sink, but it's if you start your project in a reproducible fashion, it makes it easier. Afraid someone steals or be judged on bad code. There is no bad code, but it's a good point. Yeah, someone steal or be judged on bad code. Yeah, fear of judgment. That's it. That's a recurring one. Yeah, confidentiality issues, same data. Yeah, it's a good point. This is a really good one. Lack of knowledge and how to. Yeah. I still get that. These are very common ones, especially the lack of knowledge and embarrassment. A retraction due to minor bugs. Yeah, it's a good point. Author is aware that they did not make a perfect job. I mean, there is no perfect coding. Everyone does something slightly different. That's one of the important things, and it's one of the things I want to stress in here. That sensitive data. Yeah, this is great. The reason why I bring this up is because this paper by Dylan Gomez, that was I believe part of a SORTEE hackathon. It goes into quite a lot of depth about the different perceived barriers, but then also the benefits of sharing data and code. So lots of the different reasons and suggestions of why people don't share data and code. They do go into quite a lot of details. So it's worth having a read of this paper. But for instance, um, say if there's scooping and you know your ideas are plentiful, um, the counter argument to that is that open data typically leads to more citations. Um, what was one of the other ones? Insecurity. Share with trusted colleagues and recognize there's no perfect code. So this is exactly why, meaning that it's all about learning and growth. No one becomes a perfect coder. Um, I mean, I've been coding for 10 years, which is a fraction of time of some people, and I still know that my code is not perfect in any way, shape, or form. Um, so this paper, if you have concerns about sharing data and code, this paper is really, really useful for going into the benefits and the perceived barriers. And just to talk about some of the infographics that SORTEE have produced about open code. So this one is a really nice one from, I think, yeah, one of the first conferences, actually. I think the first conference. So it goes into a lot of detail about why open code is important in research at the different levels. So from researchers, journals, publishers, and then the general public. And then related to this is also open data in research as well. So if you're interested in this, obviously, I'll share the slides, but these are freely accessible on the SORTEE OSF page, I believe, or at the very least, if you're interested, I can send it. But this is the what, why, and how of open data research, and this was another nice infographic that they produced at the first SORTEE conference. Okay, so on to more interactive questions. So the background to this is I went out in a entirely realistic um, project, and I repeatedly measured the brood size of experimental individuals in the population of burrowing beetles. These are study species I did my PhD on, and my question broadly was, does the brood size differ based on age and habitat? I believe. I think I can remember. This is obviously completely made up data and code, but it's to prove a point. This is meant to be a really extreme version. So the first thing that I would like people to do is if you go to that link that I sent, that I mentioned at the start, the reproducible data and code, um, which if people can't remember it, I can flip back to that screen. What do you think are ways that the project structure could be improved looking at that repository on the OSF page? So it should be just a whole list of files. What do you think are some simple things that you could do to improve the reproducibility of that project? And then we're talking about structure, so we're not looking in data files or code or anything like that. Da, da, da. Oh, could you share the link here? Yeah, good point. Yes. Oh, actually, I could actually probably find it and then share it. Let me just quickly find it and I will. Oh, already done it. Amazing. Right, sorry, I'll go back. So have a look at it. I'll give people maybe five minutes or so, 5, 10 minutes just to have a look at the project structure and write some comments down in Mentimeter. Same code as before. Um, and there's no silly suggestions at all. Feel free to write whatever comes to your mind. Well, within reason, obviously. And I'll just sit here drinking my coffee. Can I just check that everyone's able to find it? The link is in the chat. Folders, yes, exactly. Replace final. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to see the comments. That's not letting me. Having three, yeah, yeah, this is amazing. So having a clear folder structure is very useful. A README file, fantastic. Lack of explanation. Yeah, link to the README file. That's folders, exclamation mark. Yes, very, very important. I think people can probably understand what I think is one of the most important things. Um, Version control. Yes, good point. It's something that I'm not going to touch on in this because I think it's a little bit too complex in some ways. But I will mention it later on. Yeah, folders for sure. Yeah, great. Okay, maybe a couple more responses if anyone has any other suggestions. Okay, right, let's move on. So, oh no, consistent file names. Yes, good, good. That's very, very good suggestion. Okay, so here are just some tips and tricks that I've learned. So I'm going to go through them all. Um, that I think improves the reproducibility of a project structure markedly. So providing a README. So in some cases, and particularly with some publications, um, it's not relevant if it's not as relevant if you're setting this up pre-publication. But in some cases, they will ask you, especially if you go through Dryad, they will not let you archive data without providing a README. Um, in any case, it's worth making sure that your README contains information about how someone can navigate through your folders. So what's contained within the data and the code, and how someone actually goes about reproducing it. For instance, if you have our project file, the fact that they can load that and then get rid of any it replaces it all with local file paths rather than user-specific file paths, for instance. It's just really important to have, and there's some really good examples out there of READMEs, and I can send some to people if people are interested. Um, One of the other things is, and I think I've started seeing it more and more, is putting a part of your project structure actually listing where you put all the packages. So recently, what I've started doing is saving a session.info file from my R project. Obviously, I list most of the packages, if not all of the packages I use in my paper that's related. But in some cases, you can use you can actually save this output and then just have it on in your folder somewhere, which is really useful. It's obviously related to coding. As I mentioned, the use of the R project file. So one thing that's really nice, and I've just started becoming a data editor ecology letters. And one of the really nice things is that people have used this R project file, which means that you don't have to have um, something like users, documents, blah blah blah. That's not going to be relevant to someone who wants to reproduce it. And it's a very simple thing, but someone doesn't have to then change that file path for it to work. Um, as well, it might be worth having an output folder. So I think someone might maybe mention this, but if there are models that take a while, particularly Bayesian or stochastic modeling, you can save the outputs, and it saves particularly a reviewer lots of time. But also, if someone wants to have a look at what models you've run without actually having to run it, that's super useful. Um, there's lots of really nice packages such as Workflow R, um, that essentially make a project structure for you. So they take away a lot of the sort of the folder creation, and they can do it for you quite easily, and you can just sort of start it. Um, also, something I've become quite passionate about is reproducibility and meta-analysis, particularly. And if you've done data extraction or have done a meta-analysis, you'll know that a lot of data is in figures. Um, and the data extraction process it's a bit of a black box. Most people say that they've extracted data from this figure or this paper. It's just good to potentially consider having, well, let's see. Is there a benefit using save RDS versus simply save our data? Oh, good question. Oh God, oops, I've clicked. What have I done? Oh my God. I believe it saves it in a more R-friendly format. I believe so. If you want to load it into R, it's better. But maybe someone else can answer that. I've always saved it into a save RDS format, but maybe there's a better reason to do it. I found some issues with loading models. It means then I could load the model as well, and the output's there, and I can do more with it. But maybe I'm a bit naive about that. Um, so yeah, the last thing I was going to mention about is saving the figures that you've used in meta-analysis in their own folders, for instance, but that's very specific. Um, People mention this, but using folder structures, it's also related, but within the code folder, you can also have uh, da, 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 we'll have to manually. Okay. It's more explicit about what you want to save. Okay. There you go. I knew people would have a better idea about this than me. Um, is splitting up scripts based on a purpose. So obviously, and I'm guilty of this as well. Sometimes I will just have an analysis script, but having a package script, modeling script, graphing script, and you can then source the relevant previous folders when you're running it. And that will just make it a lot easier for someone to understand, okay, these are all the models that have been run, these are all the graphs. Um, and then informative names, the files and folders, particularly someone also mentioned this, super important so that essentially someone is signposted to know what's in each file and each folder. And lastly, two other ones useful is considering to use Markdown, and you could potentially have it knitting into one document right at the end, and that's another way to make the reviewing process easier. And then lastly, version control, which I sort of someone did mention, but within RStudio particularly, you can easily implement GitHub and Git versioning. I don't use it that often, but it's something that you can do, and you can have quite a nice sort of version control of the entire workspace, which is good. This is just some diagram from Malika Ill's talk and Code Refinery. So this is just a nice example of a project structure. So in some cases you can have a read-only raw data file, and then your process data, which is obviously you've imported the raw data, you do whatever filtering or cleaning, and then it produces the process data. So you don't really touch the read-only raw data. And then you've split up the scripts as well. I think this is quite nice. And it's similar on the right as well. It's a little bit more detailed. So the data has a README, um, as well as a license file as well. And licenses are a little bit difficult, and I'm not really going to get into it that much. But it's useful to think about in some cases, it's important to have a license in order to allow for reuse, so someone knows what they can do with your data and code. Um, but there's lots of really good guides about particularly which license you need. Uh, okay, so data. So if you look at which data file is it? It hasn't said. That's annoying. All right, let me just quickly go check. If you look at analysis final one, sorry. If you look at that data file, and sorry, analysis data final.csv, the fantastically named analysis data final. What Looking at it, what do you think are some easy rectified issues that you can see with that data file? And what advice would you give? Sorry, I keep on flicking back just to make sure I've got the right data file, which is also one of the issues with having uninformative data file names. Yes. So looking at that file, what do you think are some columns? Yeah, call names not R friendly. Very true, very true. Um, yeah, consistent column names, very important. The janitor package, by the way, very good. You can use a function called clean names, and it makes them all very R friendly with snake case and underscores. It's very good. I may mention that actually in the advice. Yeah, it might be worth also scrolling down some of the to see date format inconsistent. Yeah, perfect. Those yeah, dates in general are quite painful. There are some useful packages that make it a lot easier. Um, uh, just to discuss, this is, by the way, just an extreme example. This is not. I think people would have probably noticed some noticed errors whilst they were doing the data input, but it's just to prove a point. Yeah, different versions of NA, very important because especially when you're importing data, I'm sure people would have seen the import dataset function. You can specify what is classed as an NA. Yes, you can actually tell it NAs are this and this, but it's file names starting with analyses. Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Inconsistent age, yeah, very good. So there's a mixture of different factors, so they're all going to appear as different levels, which is not what you want. Let's have a look. Oh, Matt, take care with our data. It can suddenly overwrite environmental variables when loaded. This can lead to confusion. Okay, good point. Oh, yeah, nice. Thanks, Matt. Inconsistent categories. Yeah, short and long names. Good point. Okay, some really good suggestions here. Whoa, I don't know why I zoomed in on that one, but that's fun. Um, okay, so data. Here's just some tips and tricks. So appropriate headers. Um, Obviously, this is quite an extreme example once again, but having headers that actually um, describe what the column is, not in too much detail, obviously, but for instance, if it's age underscore days, then someone knows that it's going to be the age of the individual in days. Simple things like that, or mass underscore G, so people know it's mass in grams. Providing a README can also help with this, and as I said with Dryad, they will send back, and with any journals that have data editors like Ecology Letters, they will send back a manuscript and say you need to provide a README. And so describing each of the columns, saying what the column name is and what is expected in that column is super useful. Um, Not just for yourself, but also for anyone wanting to look at it. Um, as well, obviously, this is in a CSV format. This is interoperable. So it means anyone can really open it. You don't need to have a proprietary software, which is useful. So same with TXT. People do use XLS files quite a lot, but I can't remember which one. It's either XLS or XLSX. One of them is proprietary, so you can only open it in Microsoft Excel, but luckily there is LibreOffice and free versions. But it's worth just using this interoperable data type. Um, And obviously, avoiding spaces in the names of files is also important. It just can lead to confusion later down the line. And as I mentioned, separating raw from processed data. So obviously, if you're doing a lot of stuff to this raw data, it's worth having its own folder where you don't touch it. You then process it. You then create this new processed data file. Obviously, it goes out saying publish your data. So um, you've done all this nice project structure. You've got another clear data file. It's worth just making sure you published it. So putting on uh, any repository. I mean, I say any repository, but ones with a DOI is really useful, so it can be cited. So OSF, um, GitHub is often used, but that doesn't provide you with a DOI unless you use Zenodo. Then there's obviously Dryad. Um, but your data should adhere to the FAIR principles. So this is essentially these. So it should be findable. So it needs to have metadata. It needs to be findable. So this is DOIs. Um, Accessible. So this is related to README. So users need to know how data can be accessed. It also needs to be interoperable. So it needs to be in a file format that can allow for people to actually open it. And it needs to be reusable. So this is also related to comprehensive metadata. Um, and if your data can adhere to these principles, there's a very long list of the FAIR principles on the website. There's but there's some handy guides that that allow you to make sure that your data adheres to FAIR principles. And basically, having a DOI, what has someone written? Leaving someone non-inter so non-interoperable data would be essentially something like, so I do a lot of metabolic rate data, right? And a lot of the data I get is in the format of the software that I use that's proprietary. So if someone doesn't have that software, they can't open it. That's in a .exp data format. So if I could simply upload that, but no one could open it. So it would then be exporting that into a format that someone can use. So like a CSV file, a TXT file. Um, it's the same with, I mean, most statistical software have you can export whatever you're doing to a text file. So R is, you can open it in a text-based, in any text reader. But I don't really use Minitab or SPSS. But for instance, if you could only open them in Minitab, then that would not be interoperable. I'm not particularly too clued up on that. Um, but there is a list of interoperable file types floating out there somewhere, I'm sure. I don't have the full list of it, but it's CSVs and TXTs are typically the most universally interoperable. Okay, so code. So if you look at, which one is it? Analysis.R. What do you think are some of the potential issues with that code, and what advice do you think you could give to someone um, looking at that analysis.r file? Again, it's an extreme example, but it's to prove a point that we can all review code and review data. Yeah, more comments and descriptions. So essentially, like an internal README is useful. Yeah, that's good. So annotating correct typos. What do you mean? There was no typos. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, there's so I think I went on to ChatGPT and asked it to produce a list of 20 random packages. Uh so yes, yeah. Unnecessary library calls, more annotations. Oh yeah, the Pacman package is fantastic as well. Yeah, that's very good. Section headers and descriptions. Yeah, packages, header structure. Yeah, all good. All good. All good advice. Maybe a couple more if there's anything else. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, to be fair, I think I've mentioned this before, but the number of times I spelt length wrong, and then on April Fools on one year, they decided to release a package which was the incorrect spelling of length called the correct spell called the function with the correct spelling, which was quite funny. But okay, yeah, great. Reassigning same object name, exactly. Yes, directing names not used for another computer. So this is what I was meaning about, say, using a here package or using a R project. Okay, so obviously everyone has their own methods of writing code. Um, but you can have set styles, and sometimes it can actually be quite nice to have a consistent style. So for instance, having code going a certain length, or making sure that a bracket is I don't know, on its own line or something. The styler package is very useful. It can make code look really nice. Let's see what the comment. A good IDE should take. That's interactive development environment. Is that what it means? It's RStudio is an IDE, and uh, Microsoft. What's the recent the Positron is that one of them? I think that RStudio is an IDE. Um, so as many people mentioned as well, clear annotation and subheading. So this is super useful. So describing what your code is doing. You can even say why you're doing this. So if you're filtering, you can explain why. And as well with subheadings in code. So if I believe it's either four or five hashtags before and after a title, it will create a section break in your code. And that way you can kind of condense it. But it also means that at the bottom left of your coding panel, you can then quickly switch to move to different sections. So that's very nice. Um, Also related, if you're doing any stochastic methods or bootstrapping or um, Bayesian techniques, um, you it's useful to set seed before you're doing it. This is so you can kind of have a pseudo random uh, generation. And if you set the seed before it and you keep that set seed, then someone can reproduce exactly what you've done, which is really useful. Um, Removing redundant packages. Obviously, sometimes you've done a pack, you've maybe tried a different package to do something, and then it didn't work, and then you've sort of it's like legacy script of old things that you've tried. It's worth removing it because some people will then just if they want to run it, they might have to install it and then realize it's not being used. Um, in some cases, it's also important to call a namespace. So this is where you have the package name and you do two colons, and then it will come up with a list of the functions. And in some cases, this can be important, particularly with dplyr and filter. It can sometimes get uh, confused. There are other functions, there are other packages that use the filter function. Um, and sometimes you can get a warning message and realize that literally if you just do dplyr filter, it'll sort it out. Um, duh, 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 the with our package. Ah, nice. That sounds great. Okay, I didn't know that. Oh, good. Okay. Um, I'll check that one out. And then modularizing your code. So this is if you have any functions, you can create a separate script and then call that function from the start of your package, from the start of your say analysis code or whatever, and then it just cleans everything up. So okay, this I'm going to load this function which generates the mean or something like that, or creates the standard error. Um, and another big way, and this is one of the things I've been quite keen on, particularly across SORTEE, is code review. So improving reproducibility of code is through essentially what we've been doing with code and data and project structure is code review. So this is related to that paper that I was fortunate enough to be involved with Saris Windecker. Um, this is where you evaluate and check each other's code, and it can either happen in groups, say in your department, your institute, your office, your research group, but also going to happen formally. So it can be part of the peer review process, for instance. So someone, particularly data editors, they will go and say if you submit your paper to Proc B or Ecology Letters, they will go through and check your code. They're not going to check for for spelling errors or things like that, but they will go and make sure that your code is at least adhering to FAIR principles. Um, but the reason why code review is so important, particularly in an informal setting, is it allows for you to check multiple types of errors. Um, and I quite like this graphic here. So it's about kind of highlighting the fact that when we think of a research project, typically coding is a singular process. One person does it, and at the end you have a paper coming out of it, and I always get anxiety that I've done something wrong in my code, so I check it about a billion times to make sure that it's all correct. But typically it's one person doing it. Um, and there's lots of reasons why code is important, and checking for these little errors can be really important. So I mean, this is not meant to be sort of a catastrophic slide, but it's meant to be showing that coding errors happen, and they can lead to some pretty big retractions. Um, and this is just I can't exactly. This was a review of people who've had their papers retracted, and this was 14% of them had data coding errors. Um, just sort of highlighting how common it is. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the code that we do, particularly in ecology and evolutionary biology, is complex. We write loads and loads of lines of different code, and the probability of having a coding error is quite large, and that's why code review is really important. And these can be conceptual errors. So this is, you wanted to use the mean of data, but actually you use the wrong function. Or they could be programmatic. So you wanted to filter by column B, but you actually filtered by column A, for instance. Like very basic things, or as I said, length. So I've done this so many times, until someone very nicely created a package that corrected it for me, which was very nice. Um, and these are very common. And I think I can't remember the exact citation, but it said that the number of errors increases proportional to the number of lines of code that you write. Um, and this was the basis behind this paper here. So we wanted to really sort of implement and try and bring code review into the academic process, the research process. And we were thinking, we came up. This is one of the sort of the main graphs in it, which is what should code review look at. Um, and so we thought this was quite helpful. So if you wanted to go through all the way through this, you would ask, does the methods and code match? Can you run the code? Is the code reliable? So is it producing I don't know, the process data file that you'd expect? And then obviously this can downstream affect whether your results are reproducible. And it's nicely shown in these examples. Oh, wait, there's also this, we also provide a flow chart of how to go through this code review if you're either doing it pre-publication, post-publication. This is based on post-publication, so it's about contacting the author and the journals. But it can be used at any point in the research process, really. Where is that? One thing is he does it's like oh yes, very true. Yeah, that's why Pacman's very good. It's Pacman's a fantastic package actually. Um, so this is we show in the supplementary some examples of this. So obviously the code is reported. So data was analyzed using a Poisson structure, and potentially you've then analyzed it with a Gaussian. This is an extreme example, but I have seen it happen. And the code running. So obviously, if you're using Pacman and you're loading these files, you're loading these libraries, and you're using the Pacman function, it will install these packages for you. But I'm sure many people have seen this error coming up when you can't run a code because basically you don't have the package. And then is the code reliable? So this is obviously you've subsetted by the wrong data, the wrong file column, sorry. And then obviously the results being reproducible. Yes, as Alfredo said, it installs it for you, which is really powerful. Um, and obviously, this is an extreme example, but if there's some downstream things that are potentially going wrong, it's not uncommon that you would not be able to reproduce the results. So setting up your code for effective review. Obviously, we've kind of gone through a lot of this with the tips and tricks, but obviously it's the project organization, so the folder structure, and then related to that is the metadata, so the README, then code readability. So this is obviously a README for the code, but also internally and externally. So internally is for annotation, and and then having a README file saying how to navigate through it is really important. And then lastly, the output reproducibility. So can I actually reproduce the results? Can I see that the same figures are being reproduced? Um, so the last part, the last sort of interactive part, the last sort of 10 minutes, I guess maybe we don't have time to do a breakout room actually. Um, but if you're using so this is particularly using the data and code. So it would be good if you could do a code review. So my methods were for this is that I wanted to run to investigate the effect of habitat and age. I ran a mixed effect model in R. I was modeling brood number by Poisson distribution, and I didn't find an effect of age. So if you use the analysis code and the data from analysis final, um, using the flowcharts and the 4Rs, which are also in the repository, how far can you get through before you reach an error? Or how far, using the 4Rs, how far can you get through before before there's something that you think needs to be addressed? And I'll give people 5 minutes. But if people have uh, any queries about that, just pop them in chat. There's probably no point for breakout rooms. Actually, there might be. We have 9 minutes. That's probably too. It's probably too. Oh yes, I should have mentioned. I should have mentioned the RM package. It's very good. Nice, Gabe. That's good. It creates a basically a local environment, a project specific environment that you can then it creates a lock file and a project folder where it has all the packages installed, and so then you can make it really it takes a snapshot of the different versions that you're using. It's very good, and then you can upload that as well. Um, but yes, if you try and run the analysis code using that file, using the data file, how far can you get through the 4Rs before you run into an issue? And let's see what people say. I'll just double check. That's yes. So the 4Rs is the 4Rs.jpg if you're interested. It's not that's not I mean it's not technically part of the thing to scrutinize, but yes. See, has anyone run into any errors at all? Let's see. I mean, oh, okay, nice. Um, has anyone run into any errors or issues? And FYI, this is kind of similar to what we've done in the past with um, code review on Sortee, where we've gone through someone's repository. That I mean, they've asked us to, and they've said, "Can you reproduce the results?" And then we've reported back on um, any errors that we found. Um, However minor they were, or some advice, and it's been really, really helpful. Um, any any issues that people have found? Yes, exactly. Yeah. I can't remember the exact file path, but I assume it's not a local one, so it's you're not gonna be able to load it at all. Yes. So that would be something that you would then you can either edit it yourself, but it should really be something that you can address that quite simply. Either the author can or the person reviewing the code. Um, but it's quite useful to make sure that your code is set up in a way that anyone can use it regardless of their machine. Does anyone notice anything else? Maybe about the methods? So just to remind people, I said that I was using a Poisson distribution to analyze the brood size. If that's a unbelievable giveaway. I'll just double check that it's in the code actually. Okay. Okay, we're probably going to have to move on, but maybe if you have any issues or any other suggestions, it's worth maybe let me know or either send me an email or something like that. Um, so it would have actually probably stopped at the first stage, which is whether your results, your code match your methods. Because as I mentioned, I was running it with a Poisson distribution. But if you go down to the code, oh, it doesn't give me a line number. But the first model that I was running, I was actually running an LMER. So a linear mixed effect model rather than a generalized one. So I was actually running it with a Gaussian distribution. So kind of the example that I gave in the supplementary. I've seen this before, and the person has said that they've run something and then it's been completely not matching the methods that they've stated. So obviously this would be the first stage that it would stop, but then there's lots of different issues with you wouldn't be able to run the code at all. So you wouldn't even be able to check reproducibility because there would be lots of different stages from spelling mistakes to packages not being loaded to data not being able to be loaded that would stop you from doing it. So it's just some things to bear in mind. But that is essentially the essence of code review. You would pick up these mistakes. You would then let the person know if it's in your office, your lab group. You can then tell them in a sort of a informal environment, and then they can sort these issues out. So that's why it's so powerful. Um, so just we end with the in this paper with some tips for setting up a code review group. So we use GitHub when we were doing it in SORTEE. And we found this quite useful because obviously you can use someone's repository, you can go into their repository, download it, and then you can create GitHub issues around it, which is useful. Um, it's also useful to set clear goals. This is related to group size, but for instance, if you have a big group of people, maybe 10 people, you probably want to do more of a general overview of like, here are some tips, here are some tricks, rather than having one person feel like they've been bombarded. But we were lucky that we had a kind of a mixture of small sizes, but then large sizes. So in certain cases, it was almost like a one-on-one that someone was having their code, someone going through to see if they could reproduce it, which was useful. As I've mentioned all along, coding errors are normal. No one is a perfect coder. There's loads of different ways of doing exactly the same analysis, going through the same problem. Some people like tidyverse, some people like base R. Um, but coding errors are completely normal. Everyone makes mistakes. And lastly, incentivizing code reviews. So say if I had that code, someone went through and found actually you were running completely the wrong models. It's thinking about how then you could incentivize that as well. So maybe even putting them in the acknowledgements of a paper to say that, this person checked my check the reproducibility of my code, for instance. Um, and there's lots of other things that I sort of haven't talked about here. But there's been hackathons about this in the past at the SORTEE conference. So Markdown and GitHub, really, really powerful, particularly with GitHub and version control. Um, there's also, as Gabe pointed out, the RM package, so project environments, and also related to that is Docker. I have never really used Docker. Apparently, it's quite difficult to set up, but it's basically um, essentially like an online, I believe it's online, um, sort of what's the word? Um, like a snapshot of the packages and environment. Um, but hopefully this is kind of give you an insight into some of the tips and tricks that you can use, and just to get you thinking about how to make your project data and code more reproducible. And hopefully, uh, it's encourage some people to maybe start a code review group. We also have a code club at SORTEE where we discuss. They meet quite regularly. I believe it's every month. There's some blogs on the SORTEE website at the moment that go into it. Um, and then the last thing I'll end with is just obviously if you're not a SORTEE member, it'd be great if you could join. Here are my contact details if you want to email or contact me about anything. And just two last bits. SORTEE Annual Conference is 15th to 16th of October, I believe. Tell me I'm wrong if that's wrong. And lastly, we've got a symposium at ESEB 2025. So we've got some fantastic invited speakers that they're going to be talking about diversity and transparency in ecology and evolution. Um, so if you have any pieces of work that you think would fit, feel free to submit an abstract. Thank you for coming and being so interactive with this workshop. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ed, for that workshop.